Deadpool and Wolverine, directed by Sean Levy, is a movie I was looking forward to for quite a while. Not only because I really enjoyed the other Deadpool movies, but also because I was excited to see Hugh Jackman return as Wolverine for one last time, for the second time. Deadpool has come a long way when it comes to movies, and he hasn't always been the Deadpool that we know now. Remember this? But after that, he went on to have 2 movies, and both of them were financial and commercial successes. So how does Deadpool and Wolverine stack up to the first 2 movies? This movie is pretty different from the first 2 in the franchise, and a big reason for that is the inclusion of the multiverse. This movie follows Deadpool as he's joined by a jaded Wolverine, and the 2 of them travel throughout the void, which is basically the junkyard of the multiverse, as Deadpool is on a mission to save his timeline from being destroyed, along with the people that he cares about. This video is going to have 2 sections, a spoiler-free section and a spoiler section. The first part being the spoiler-free section. I'll start off by saying that this is a really fun movie. It has a lot of the same type of self-aware, fourth wall breaking humor that the first 2 movies have, with a lot of the jokes being aimed at Disney, Fox, and the MCU. And if these types of jokes don't work for you within the first 2 movies, they're not going to work for you this time around. Me personally, I enjoyed the jokes. There's a couple of instances where the humor doesn't really work for me. For instance, there's a joke in the second half of the movie that kinda drags on and just ends up slowing the movie down. But it contains spoilers, so I'll talk more about that later. But overall, the humor in this movie is really good. And the action is another situation where if you really like it in the first 2 movies, you'll like it here. And I think this is the most bloody and over-the-top action of the entire franchise. And it's great. The added factor of Wolverine allows for a lot of over-the-top fight scenes. This is all to say that I think the action is one of the highlights of the entire movie. Another one of the strongest aspects of the movie is the way that Deadpool and Wolverine are handled as characters. I find the character journeys that they go on throughout the movie to be very engaging. Both characters are flawed, and the movie does a great job at making you want to see them overcome their obstacles. The movie dedicates the necessary time to make you really feel for these characters. And the way in which Deadpool and Wolverine play off each other is great. And the comedy is one reason for that. Deadpool being the ridiculous wisecracking one and Wolverine being the rough around the edges serious one makes for some great comedic moments. I can't give too much away, but the way that the movie illustrates how these characters would be worse off if they didn't meet is great. This review has been pretty positive so far, and it's gonna stay that way for now. The acting in this movie is all around great. Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman are as great as ever as their characters. Emma Corrin is great as Cassandra Nova and does a really good job at delivering the twisted yet jokey aspects of the character. I do think they could have fleshed out the character a bit more, but she's still really entertaining. Matthew McFadden is great as Paradox. He's great at delivering the pompous and slightly over-the-top moments that the character has. Overall, the performances in this movie are great and they help elevate the entertainment value. Now, in terms of talking about cameos and character appearances, a lot of those contain spoilers, but not all of them. I'll talk more about the cameos and appearances in the spoiler section, but for the most part, they're pretty well done. Laura's inclusion in the movie is great, and she helps propel Logan forward as a character. She's in the marketing, that's not a spoiler. And also Daphne Keane is once again great as the character. I was a bit nervous about how the cameos would be handled, because a lot of the time these crowd cheering moments can kind of seem forced in there, or sometimes they don't really fit the story that's being told. And I don't really think that's the case in this movie. Having moments that the audience can cheer about can be great if it's done in a controlled manner, and there's a reason for it within the confines of the movie. And generally speaking, I think that's how they're handled in this movie. This movie is overall really entertaining, and that's because of the violent action, the over-the-top jokes, and the chemistry between the characters. Okay, now I'm getting into spoiler territory. To start off, I want to talk about how Wade is handled as a character. This movie picks up after the events of Deadpool 2, as Wade travels to Earth 616, and he tries to convince Happy Hogan to make him an Avenger. Side note, it's really great to see Happy Hogan again. But after Wade is turned down, he's never really the same. The rejection basically consumes him, and this affects his relationship with Vanessa, and it's the catalyst for their breakup. Paradox, who's part of the TVA, offers to bring Wade over to the sacred timeline, Earth 616, but he also reveals that Wade's world is dying, as Logan was something called an anchor being, and he died, so now the world is slowly falling apart. But Paradox wants to speed up the process of this universe's destruction. So this means that Wade's world would be destroyed, and all the people that he cares about would be gone. Even though Wade wants to be an Avenger and join the sacred timeline, and he wants to matter, he chooses to do the right thing and to try and save his world instead of taking up Paradox on his offer. And in the end, Wade doesn't get to be an Avenger, but he doesn't really seem to mind. And that's because the ones he truly cares about are safe. He still manages to make a difference, Avenger or not. And it's hinted at that maybe there is hope for Vanessa and him after all. There's selflessness that's displayed within the character, but also this determination and willingness to help those he loves. Unfortunately, a lot of the supporting characters from the first two movies aren't as present in this one. They don't get as much screen time this time around. Considering this movie is part of the Deadpool franchise, I think that's a fair critique. I think it's especially unfortunate in the case of Vanessa, as her and Wade's chemistry is such a strong part of that first movie. But on the other hand, they're not really required to be more present for the story that's being told, so it makes sense as to why they're not in it more. This movie has its fun and ridiculous moments, just like the first two movies, but it also has its heartfelt and powerful moments. I think a prime example of that is the part towards the end of the movie with Wade and Logan destroying the Time Ripper. There are these flashes of their past being spliced in, and the music that plays over the whole thing just adds to the drama. It's a fantastic part of the movie. And I would say that it's one of the most powerful and memorable parts of the movie. Okay, let's talk about cameos and character appearances. This movie has a lot of appearances of different characters, and a lot of them are from the Fox Marvel movies. Watching all these characters pop up in the theater was really fun. I'll just mention the ones that intrigued me the most, starting off with the Human Torch. And this Human Torch is from the Tim Story Fantastic Four movies, and he's played by Chris Evans. Watching this in the theater and seeing Chris Evans return to the MCU was really great to watch, even if he's not Steve Rogers in this movie. If anything, him not returning as Steve Rogers actually preserves that character's legacy. And the Human Torch says some really outrageous stuff in this movie that Captain America would never say, and I think that's also pretty funny. But I will say that the CGI on Johnny when he dies doesn't look great. The way he looks after his skin is pulled off just doesn't look super real. But besides that, the CGI in the movie is great. And I really like how Channing Tatum shows up as Gambit. And the running joke where Deadpool just has no idea what he's saying is pretty funny. It's a joke that doesn't get old because it doesn't overstay its welcome. Not only that, but Blade and Elektra also show up. And the fight scene where Deadpool and Wolverine fight alongside Blade, Elektra, Laura, and Gambit is great. And seeing Henry Cavill pop up as Wolverine was kinda crazy. I really didn't expect that. But he fits the character really well. But I do think that the part towards the end with Nicepool kinda drags on a bit. To me, the joke where he just keeps getting shot isn't really that funny, and that's because it goes on for too long. Also, it's weird how later in that scene, all of the Deadpools just get completely distracted by Peter. I think it's a lazy way to get Wade and Logan to just escape that fight. But whatever, it's not that big of a deal. For the most part, I would say that the cameos and appearances in this movie really work. Yeah, obviously they're included as a way to have the audience cheer and get excited, but that's not a bad thing. You can have crowd cheering moments, but you should properly contextualize those moments, and I think for the most part, this movie does that really well. It seems to me that there's some weird stuff going on with the timeline in this movie. If Deadpool exists in the same universe as the movie Logan, why doesn't Deadpool try to find Logan from his timeline when he's alive instead of when he's dead, like he does at the beginning of the movie? Because remember, Logan happens later on in the timeline. Can anyone explain this? Because it doesn't really make sense. Now, does this ruin the movie for me? No, of course not. Is the movie still a really good time with some great moments? Yeah. But is the movie perfect? No. But that's fine, it doesn't have to be. Overall, this movie is a lot of fun. It has fantastic action, really fun jokes, the chemistry between Deadpool and Wolverine is great, and the cameos and character appearances, for the most part, are well incorporated. If you're a fan of Marvel, I think that there's a good chance that this movie will have moments that you love, even if you don't love the entire movie. And if this really is the last time Hugh Jackman plays Wolverine, which I doubt, then this is a really worthy send-off. So tell me what you think about Deadpool and Wolverine in the comments section. Make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.